Back with you here on the Newsfeed PM, and thanks for staying on. There seems to be no end in sight to the ongoing hostilities in the Middle East. The United States President Donald Trump says they will inflict more pain with more airstrikes until Iran surrenders unconditionally, a demand Iran has rejected. Iran has meanwhile promised to stop attacking its neighbours unless they are used to launch strikes. Now, for more on this escalating tension in the region, I'm joined by Dr. Mireille Rebeiz, the Chairperson of the Middle East Studies at Dickinson College in the United States. Dr. Mireille, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. What we know so far is that the Iranian president has released a new statement in a series of social media posts. But in this particular one, he says the Islamic Republic of Iran has always emphasized the preservation and continuation of friendly relations with the government of the region based on good neighborliness and mutual respect for national sovereignty and territorial integrity. He says this does not negate Iran's inherent right to defend itself against military aggression by the United States and Zionist regime. We stand and resist to death to defend our country. Continues to say, we have not attacked our friendly and neighboring countries, but rather targeted American military bases, installations, and facilities in the region. How should we read this statement? Is Iran looking for an off-ramp?
First, thank you for having me. That's a very good question. Actually, it's a first attempt at return to diplomatic relations, at least in the past 2 weeks that we've seen this escalation happening. There's this first attempt. Now, the question is, I don't think it's well perceived by the Arab Peninsula and the Gulf countries. Definitely, there is an attempt here to de-escalate by justifying the targeting of only American interest in the region. However, the Gulf Council, the CGG, did not see this in that way. As a matter of fact, if we're thinking military strategy, the Arab Gulf has not been on the offensive, just on the defensive. However, the apology that just came out, I don't think is gonna change the frustration that is felt across the region, notably between the Sunni street and the Shia street, and the opposition between the Arab Peninsula and the community of the Arab Peninsula versus the Iranian regime. In other words, this is empty words for now.
Meanwhile, as I've already mentioned, President Trump says some 42 Iranian Navy ships have been destroyed. This is him speaking in Florida to leaders of the Latin American countries at his golf resort there in Miami. Are we to read from that, and including this statement from Iran, that the Iranian military capability has been degraded somewhat significantly?
To be very honest, there's a lot of contradictory information on what military infrastructure has been targeting. I don't know if it's deliberate, not revealing information on the U.S. And Israeli part, or whether the Iranian propaganda is glorifying its own military capacity. But the one thing that we know for sure is the United Nations nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi had come out and said the inspectors had not found any evidence that Iran is capable of nuclear capacities in terms of weapons. So to answer your question, is Iran still standing strong according to its own report? And from a military point of view, it is. How much has been destroyed? I think there's a lot of darkness from what we're hearing from both sides.
What are the regional implications? How is this affecting stability across the wider Middle East?
So it's important to recognize that the Middle East has been already destabilized. There was the ongoing genocide in Gaza, that in the arrest warrant that the International Criminal Court had put out against Prime Minister Netanyahu. So it's already been destabilized. In the context of Lebanon, even though there was a ceasefire, Israel violated the ceasefire 855 times since November 2024. So to think that there was no instability in the Middle East, it's simply not true. However, definitely now it's a wider disability that is including the Gulf country, and we are at risk of seeing it expand through the Mediterranean with the interference of the potential interference or the entry in the on the scene of Cyprus, Greece, France and the UK. Spain made it clear that it does not want to interfere. Now, for the Middle East, the destabilization is manifesting itself in several folds. We're talking about displacement of civilian population, mass displacement. We're talking about destruction of civilian infrastructure, loss of life, specifically of children, in the Gulf Peninsula, in Lebanon, and in Iran, and in Israel, and of course in Palestine as well. Where this is going, the situation is extremely volatile.
Israeli military orders the people in southern Lebanon to leave. I hear that's the latest report, while it also says Lebanon will pay a heavy price if Hezbollah continues to attack Israel. What is likely going to be the influence of Hezbollah in this conflict and their involvement in coming in?
So I want to emphasize that Hezbollah is not the state of Lebanon. The state of Lebanon made it clear that it's opposed entirely to this war, and it's doing everything the state of Lebanon can to actually contain its war, including straightening its borders and refusing visa entry to Iranians who are suspected to be Revolutionary Guard. Also reaching out to both Arab powers such as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, basically the Arab Peninsula, but also its allies in the West, including France, for diplomatic relations. Hezbollah, unfortunately, has an ideology that obeys exclusively the supreme leader of Iran, and it's made clear that its allegiance lies with Iran, is ignoring all attempt of a ceasefire and ending this war. So it's going to continue with its aggression. Having said that, I want to emphasize here that whether Hezbollah had entered the war or not, Israel had made it clear that it has its intention to expand in Lebanon and occupy the land of Lebanon. It has never hidden this agenda. So it is very clear that Israel has always had its eye on South Lebanon and even further than that. So my concern is that it's not just about Hezbollah and how Hezbollah is going to interfere on this, but also that we're looking at the occupation of Lebanon.
The UK aircraft that carries the HMS Prince of Wales is on the advance. What does that mean? What are the broader global implications of the UK saying, well, we are at a state of preparedness to advance?
Well, so far the UK has, first of all, it made it clear that they oppose the war. However, they're allowing the United States to use its airspace and military spaces and military bases across the world to launch these attacks. So far, they have been on the defense, and they're sending, up to my knowledge, 4 more ships to be docked by Cyprus or potentially by Greece. So clearly, so far, we have, as I said earlier, the Arab Peninsula being on the defense mode. But this means also the UK might be entering, even though on a defense mode, but it might be entering the scene soon.
How concerned should international communities, including the likes of us here in South Africa, be about this turning into a wider regional conflict?
Unfortunately, the impression right now that it's just regional, that it's just the Middle East, but this is going to be impacting all of us, at least from a humanitarian point of view. The loss of civilian lives is something that we should all be opposed. But reality on the ground, I'm thinking that it might be impacting us, one, from policy. President Trump made immediate retaliatory comments against Spain when Spain made it clear that they're opposing the war. So immediately, President Trump made retaliatory comments in that sense. Economically, we're going to see there was a $10 increase of the barrel in oil. So economically, we're going to see an impact, and that's going to be a global impact. The Arab Peninsula, the Arab countries made it clear that they're pulling out potentially up to $5 trillion of investment from the United States, investment that they had agreed to last year. So the least it's we're going to see is a global economical impact, and that's going to reach out all. It's not going to be, just in the Middle East. It's going to reach out the rest of the world.
Let's talk about that humanitarian picture and what it looks like, Dr. Mireille. I mean, Lebanon's official national news agency citing figures from the country's health ministry of about 41 people who were killed in Israeli strikes in the eastern Bekaa Valley. What is the humanitarian situation on the ground right now?
The humanitarian situation, as I said, like there's a huge violation of international humanitarian law. Israel has been targeting not only what it's calling Hezbollah hubs or spots, but it's also has been targeting infrastructure. And we know civilian infrastructure would be a violation of international law to be targeted, but also it's weaponizing hunger, including the targeting of water plants. In terms of loss of life, as you mentioned, we have 41 people who are dead, including children. Over 1 million of the population has been forcibly displaced. And Israel made it clear that it's going to use Khan Yunis, which is part of Gaza, as an example to do also in South Beirut. In other words, Israel went on record to recognize that it's going to destroy entirely all form of life, civilian life in this part of Lebanon. So the violations are severe. The human loss, I would not be surprised if we're going to see it on the rise in the couple of days. And the displacement is definitely more than Lebanon could contain. This is to say also that Lebanon housed the highest level of Syrian refugees in the world per capita, as well as over 400,000 Palestinian refugees who are also ordered to evacuate. So in other words, the humanitarian need is great, and Lebanon does not have the capacity to host all these population in its tiny country, in its tiny space up further north.
Now, some are reporting that for the first time, Iran is now going to begin to target some data centers in the UAE and Bahrain, which others are saying this signals a new frontier in this warfare. What are some of the key developments that we should be watching for in the coming days? And in your view, what could possibly be the realistic scenario that will play out here?
So in terms of data warfare or AI and, anything that we're talking about the realm of internet, it is, when I read the news, I thought it's a little bit confusing because on the one hand, Iran is apologizing to the Arab Peninsula, including, the Emirates. On the other hand, they're, announcing another form of warfare. This will definitely impact the region, but it's also, as I said, it's going to impact cybersecurity. The goal is definitely to destabilize the connection between some of these countries. We need to remember that the Emirates had signed as part of the Abraham Accord and had normalized relations with Israel. So is the goal to destabilize data sharing between the Emirates and Israel? That could be the role. But on the other hand, it doesn't fit the narrative that is coming out of Iran that we apologize to these Arab nations. As to what we need to look for, I am seriously concerned that we're heading toward a major escalation. The war is not going to be contained to the Middle East. At least there's going to be an economical impact that we're all going to feel. And I will add, it's also for us, as I live here in the United States, it's a distraction on major things happening in the United States. And we have a president who's highly volatile. So I think that we are heading toward a really uncertain times globally.
Dr. Mireille Rebeiz, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on, Chairperson of Middle East Studies at Dickinson College in the United States.